It never ceases to amaze me that I can get awesome meals like this from a couple of simple jars on my pantry shelf. Come along with me and see how it's done. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back everyone. Today I've got another meal in a jar for you. It's something a little different that you are gonna love. We love meals in a jar as part of our emergency food plan, but we also use them for other things. Quick meals when we don't have much time to cook, haven't been to the store. We like giving them as gifts or blessing someone with a meal. There's all kinds of times that we can use these meals because honestly, this one may be kind of a stretch as an emergency meal because it does have several different components that all cook up separately. But imagine being able to whip up something like this on a moment's notice if an unexpected guest stops by. Or even being able to have a special meal like this if something like a financial or medical crisis saps your grocery budget. You can serve these for breakfast or brunch, like I had them, or you could even serve them as a dessert. The crepes themselves, without the sweet filling and topping, are incredibly versatile. They can be served many different ways. You can even fill them with a savory filling and use them as a lunch or supper dish. In fact, after the berry vanilla crepes, I'm going to give you a bonus recipe for a savory crepe filling so you can have mix and match crepe recipes on your pantry shelf. So let's get started and I'll show you what goes into the jars and then how to take those jars quickly and easily turn them into a beautiful, delicious meal. I'm going to be using 2 jars for this meal. I'm going to be using 1 pint jar and 1 quart jar. The pint jar, this is not a wide mouth pint. You could certainly use a wide mouth pint. I just kind of wanted them to look a little more similar. And this is a wide mouth quart because I want to be able to get my bigger ingredients in here more easily. I'm making it in 2 jars because there's kind of a lot of components to this meal. And I'm going to be doing the crepes in the pint jar and I'm going to be doing the topping and the filling in the quart jar. And I like it that way because you could make up a lot of different jars of the crepes and then you can have fillings separately because there's all different sorts of fillings and toppings you can use for crepes. You can have savory dinner crepes with, meat and vegetables in the filling. You can have sweet crepes for breakfast or for dessert. There's lots of different ways to do it. So this way you can mix up a lot of batches of crepes in these jars and then they're separate from the fillings so that you can mix and match as you please. So you can grab a jar of crepes and use them for anything. And you can have lots of different fillings and toppings that are separate. I am keeping the topping and filling for this recipe in the 1 quart jar just because I don't want to have too many different jars. I do like to keep things as simple as I can with my jar meals. So for the crepes, I'm going to take my pint-sized jar and I'm going to be using my pantry sheet to measure some of the ingredients for this. You might remember I got this new gadget recently and I've been setting it up and learning how to use it. Now because this is not a wide mouth jar, I really need something to help filter it into this jar. So I have this funnel is actually meant for spices and seasonings for filling up my spice jars, but it has a low profile and so it'll fit under here nicely. So for the crepes, I'm going to be starting with 1 cup of flour. Now this jar isn't very big, so it doesn't seem like there's going to be a whole lot of mix for this, but this is actually going to make about 8 crepes. I actually got, I think, 8 large ones and 1 small one, so it just really depends on how you divvy them out, but that's really enough for 4 people if you do 2 crepes per person, and that's pretty typical for a jar meal. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the pantry sheet and put my flour canister on. So it knows I've got flour on there, and what I need is 1 cup of flour. So I'm going to go ahead, it's on cups already, so I'm going to go ahead and put it to 1 cup. And it's going to measure a cup of flour for me. I love this machine because this is dispensing by weight, and that is absolutely the most accurate way to dispense your ingredients. Because there can be a lot of variation in how much product you actually have in your measuring cup, depending on how loosely or firmly you've packed it, how you've leveled it off, and things like that. So for really, really great baking, it's best to measure by weight. And so that's what this machine does. Just going to give that a shake to level it. Next, I'm going to add sugar. And I need 3 tablespoons of sugar. So I'm going to change it from cups to tablespoons. And I want 3. Okay. And next I need salt. This time I want 1/4 teaspoon. That's actually what it's on. Probably because that's the last measurement I used. There's only 2 more ingredients we need in this jar, and one of them is going to be instant milk powder. Now there is a setting on the pantry sheet for powdered milk, I think it says, or dry milk. I'm not sure because the instant milk that I use is so much different than the typical powdered milk that people usually use in baking. So I'm not sure if it would be equivalent as far as the weights. So what I'm going to do eventually is I'm going to weigh a cup of this milk and see if it equals exactly the same as the one that's programmed into the machine. Then I could start using the pantry sheet to dispense my instant milk. And then if not, I do believe you can program in your own ingredients just by weighing how many grams 1 cup weighs and then entering that in. And you can enter in your own ingredients that way. So I might do that, but that's something I have not quite figured out yet. So I'm just going to measure my instant milk the old-fashioned way, and I'm going to be using 1.5 tablespoons. So there's 1 tablespoon and 1/2 tablespoon. And then the final ingredient for the crepes is going to be my scrambled egg powder. And I'm using 1/4 cup of the eggs. Now people often ask me if this scrambled egg mix is the same thing as whole egg powder. It's pretty close. I use this scrambled egg mix wherever I would use whole egg powder. This is the only type of powdered eggs that I buy because these work really well as an egg substitute in recipes, but they also taste really good when they're cooked up just as scrambled eggs, which a lot of powdered eggs don't. And so if I can get away with using just one product instead of buying several, then that's what I'm going to do. So wherever it says whole egg powder, I use this. I use this as a substitute for eggs in any baking mix that I put together. If you look at the ingredients between different scrambled egg powders and whole egg powders, there's a big variation in ingredients between the different brands, so definitely be mindful of what you're buying. All right, so that's all of the ingredients for this jar. Now you might notice that this jar is not completely full, and there's kind of a reason for that, because if you're going to be cooking your crepes up, you might want something to grease your pan. Now, most of us have some kind of oils in our food storage, cooking spray, things like that. Some of us might have canned butter. Either you're a Rebel canner, you can it yourself, or you can buy canned butter. I will try to put a link for that down in the description box if I can. But I thought, because with my meals in a jar, I like to have everything you need all right there. I don't like to have any additional ingredients required. So I am going to be using one of these ghee packets. I get these to use in things like my meals in a bag, where you might want a little bit of butter or something to saute something in. You can get olive oil packets, but depending on the recipe, you might want something that's a little bit closer to butter. So ghee is basically just clarified butter. And I get these packets on Amazon. They're really great for things like this. So I am just going to fold that up and insert that right in my jar. And that way, when I open this up, I will have something that I would need to fry it up in the pan. Now there's still room for an oxygen absorber in here if I was going to be putting this away for long-term storage. But of course, I'm going to be fixing this jar up so I can show you how this turns out. But so here we go. This jar of crepe mix is ready to go on the shelf. Just add water. So what I'm going to do for the quart jar is I'm going to go ahead and put the topping ingredients into here. And then I'm going to put the filling ingredients separately, and I'm going to have them in a baggie, and I'm going to put the baggie inside with the topping so that it all stays separate. This is not typical for me with my meals in a jar. I don't like to have things very complicated. I like to have it pretty simple, but every once in a while it's fun to do something a little different. So for the topping, I'm doing a strawberry topping. So it's going to consist mainly of strawberries, of course. Oh, those smell so good. I am going to use a funnel for this one, and I'm going to be adding 3 cups of strawberries. Now, if you have any small bits or powder, they're absolutely perfect for this. When I was looking at recipes online, I actually saw some recipes for a strawberry topping like this that actually called for strawberry flavoring and red food coloring, which I couldn't believe, because you really don't need that, especially when you have all the powder from the freeze-dried food. Actually, powdered freeze-dried fruit is a really good natural food coloring. A lot of moms who are trying to stay away from the food dyes in their kids' food will use powdered freeze-dried fruit in frostings and pancakes and yogurt and all sorts of things to color them. So we're going to get all the flavor and color that we need just from these berries. Now the other 2 ingredients I need for the topping, I can measure with my pantry sheet. These jars actually fit perfectly underneath and it goes right in, so I don't need a funnel. Just need to put it in from the side there. So I'm going to be using sugar. I'm going to be using 1/3 cup of sugar, so I want to get to cups. There's 1/3 cup. And I'm going to use cornstarch. It's going to be 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. That's what it's on because this is the last thing I dispensed was this recipe. Okay. I've got all my ingredients in there. I'm just going to give this a tap to get those down in. That way the sugar and the cornstarch will filter in among the berries, so they're not going to take up any additional space in this jar, so we'll have room for our topping. Now for the topping, like I mentioned, I'm going to be doing it in a baggie inside that jar, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dispense everything into a measuring cup, and then I'll just pour it into my baggie. So I am going to be using cornstarch in my filling, so I'm going to go ahead and leave this canister on here. It's going to be 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. And next I'm going to use sugar, 1/3 cup. And everything else I'm going to be doing without the pantry sheet. It does call for salt, but it only calls for a pinch, and this only goes down to 1/4 teaspoon. So I'm just going to use my pinch measuring spoon and take it right out of my little salt thingy here. Now I'm going to be whisking this as I go, just to keep everything fairly well mixed and blended. I'm going to be using the milk powder, and that's going to be 1/2 cup. I'm going to use 1/4 cup of cream cheese powder. Once again, I'm going to whisk this. Try to keep everything well blended so we won't have clumps in our finished product. I'm going to use vanilla powder, 1/2 teaspoon of this, and that's it. So this is our filling, and we've basically made a vanilla pudding mix here is what we've done, because that's exactly what that filling tastes like at Denny's. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get this into the baggie. I don't think I need a funnel. Okay, so now that I've got this bag all filled, I'm just going to kind of twist it a little bit and fold it over. I am not going to seal this bag. I'm going to be putting it inside this jar of the topping ingredients. So if I was putting this away for long term, if I was putting this away for longer than a year, I would put an oxygen absorber in here. And if I leave this not sealed, the oxygen absorber can interact with the oxygen inside this bag as well. And so it will be a little bit more effective for the whole jar. So I'm going to leave this open. I'm just going to ball it up as much as I can and put it down in the jar. And we can crush these strawberries down as much as we need to get this in, because it's okay if they're crushed. It's still going to taste just as good. So now this is ready to go. Like I mentioned, if I was going to be putting this away for long term on the shelf, then I would add an oxygen absorber on the top. So here's our vanilla cream filling and our strawberry topping and our crepe mix all ready to go. Now I'm going to show you how I cook these up and just how quick and easy it is to turn these jars into an amazing meal with only water. I've got to be honest though, I am not the best crepe maker, so my crepes may not be the most aesthetically pleasing, beautiful crepes. I get some pretty funky shapes, but they still taste just as good. I did get myself a crepe pan, but it's definitely not necessary. You can just as easily cook your crepes in any skillet that has enough surface to spread the batter out. The pan I got came with a crepe spreader, which is something I always thought I wanted, thought I needed, but now that I've been playing with it, I think it's actually easier just to swirl the pan around. I don't know, I guess I need a lot more practice making crepes so I can become a crepe master like my dad. I will say though, that now that we have jars of Just Add Water crepe mix on the shelves, I do think we're gonna be eating crepes a lot more often. All right, so I'm going to get started on the crepes, and the first thing I'm going to do is mix up the crepe batter, and that's because this is best if it sits for a little while before it's actually cooked. And so I'm going to mix this up in my batter bowl, and I'm going to let it set while I prepare the filling and the topping. You can mix this up and let it set out on the counter for half an hour to an hour, or you can put it in the fridge for even longer, 2 hours or more. if you're not in an emergency situation where you're trying not to open your fridge. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up and take out my packet of ghee. And I am actually going to pass this through a sifter, a wire mesh strainer, just because I don't want to have any lumps in my batter. So I figure if I put my flour and everything through a strainer and kind of sift it out and then blend it together well before I add the water, I probably won't get any lumps. I thought about sifting it before I put it in the jar, but if you think about it, you can get everything nice and sifted. And then if you're going to put this on your shelf for a few months or a few years, you probably could have lumps in your flour, again, clumps, by the time you open it up. So I'm going to do it this way. You'll see all those little lumps in my flour. Not sure what that's from, but we will take care of that. And there will not be lumps in our crepes. All right, so now I'm just going to whisk this all together with my whisk. And I'm going to add the water. We're using 1 1/3 cups of cold water for this. Now remember, crepe batter is pretty thin. It's a very thin batter, and that's why it makes such a thin pancake. All right, this is looking really nice and lump-free. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and set this aside, and I'm going to go grab my butane stove and get to work on the filling and the topping for these crepes. All right, here is my butane stove, and here's the fuel for it. Just line up that notch with this little tab and lock it in place, and we're ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and open up our filling and topping jar. Now I'm going to take out the baggie of the filling, and this is what I'm going to mix up first. Now I have a nice heavy bottom pan here because this has a lot of milk products in it, dairy, and whenever I cook something like that, it can tend to scorch on the bottom. It probably will anyways, but I'm just going to stir it as carefully as I can and be real careful with it. I'm going to go ahead and add this mix into the saucepan. This is basically just like a vanilla pudding mix, what we've made here. Now, I just as easily could have also passed this through the strainer. I almost kind of wish I had, but I think it'll be okay. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 cups of water to this mix. And I'm going to get this whisked all together before I put on the heat. All right, now that I've got this pretty well mixed, I'm going to go ahead and put on the heat. Turn it down just a bit. We do want to bring this up to a boil, but I don't want to do it too quickly because I don't want to scorch it or burn the bottom too badly. A little bit might be inevitable. Especially on an emergency cook stove like this, I find this is very powerful, and it's actually difficult to get it turned down very low. I am going to whisk this pretty much constantly just to avoid it burning and sticking on the bottom, but it's not going to take very long. Once this gets up to a boil for just a couple of minutes, it's going to be thickened and ready to go. All right, this is getting pretty hot, and I can feel it starting to thicken right now. It's going to boil here shortly. And then it'll be about done. Now this is getting pretty thick, and of course it will thicken a little bit more as it cools. We're not going to let it completely cool, but we're not going to have it boiling hot either when we serve it. All right, it is starting to bubble. Just going to let it go for another minute or so. All right, I think I'm going to turn this off because this is going to bubble right out of the pan. All right, I'm going to go ahead and set this aside to cool, and then we will do the topping really quickly while this cools off a little bit. So for the topping, I'm going to use a different pan this time, but I have done this where I have cooked up the filling and put it into like an insulated bowl, like a thermos type of bowl, and then rinsed out the pan, wiped out the pan, and used the same pan for the topping. So if you were making this during a time when the power was out, you didn't want to do a lot of extra dishes, that would be something you could do. So I'm going to go ahead and add these topping ingredients into here. And for this, I'm going to be using 1 1/4 cups of water. I'm actually going to pour it into the jar just so that I can rinse out all that powdery stuff in there so we don't waste anything. Now this is 1 1/4 cups. This makes it pretty thick. So if you wanted a little bit more syrupy, you could add an extra 1/4 cup to this of water. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and give this all a stir and get this all blended together once again before I add the heat. Get everything moistened. Right now I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat on. We're just going to really heat this until it simmers and thickens, which isn't going to take very long, and that's going to soften these berries right up and make a delicious topping. Then I'm going to set that aside to cool a little bit. We do want our filling and topping warm, but the crepes will cook up super, super fast. Like I mentioned, you can use some sort of an insulated bowl, or even just wrapping these in a towel or something would help keep the heat in a little bit more. So you can see as soon as this starts to simmer, it is going to thicken right up. And this is actually ready. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off and go ahead and set this one aside too. And now we're ready to fix our crepes. All right, so here is my crepe pan. You can see it's got a nice, not a very deep edge. It's nice and flat with a non-stick coating. This actually works pretty well. I've got my ghee packet here that I've opened up, and I'm going to just squeeze a little bit of that out onto the pan. It doesn't take much, and I've got a silicone brush here that I'm going to use to spread it around once I get the heat on. I'm going to go ahead and give my batter one more whisk before we get started. Just make sure it's still well blended. And what I'm going to use to scoop my batter is a 1/4 cup measure. I do have my crepe spreader in case I decide I want to try using that, and I have a turner that can help me get them up off the pan, but they're so flexible and thin that sometimes it helps to use your fingers as well. Now, I'm not sure how it's going to go regulating the heat on this stove. Like I said, this gets pretty hot, so hopefully I can keep from burning these crepes. All right, so let's get this going. You can see it's getting just dry on the surface, other than these couple spots that I messed up on. Dry on the surface. Hasn't really browned on the other side, but I think it's going to be time to flip it over. Starting to brown a little bit. The other side is starting to brown pretty nicely, so this is pretty much done. I'm just going to use this first one to show you how these fix up. All right, so we've got our pudding here, our vanilla cream. And we're just going to put about a 1/4 cup on each crepe and spread it out on half of the crepe. I'm just going to fold that over like that, and again like that, and add some of our strawberry topping. And that is ready to serve. I think I'm going to put it on a little bit of a nicer plate though first. Okay, now for the bonus recipe I promised you for the savory crepe filling. Just like sweet crepes, there are a ton of different variations that you can do for a savory crepe. So get creative. Let me know down below, what do you think would make a good savory crepe filling? The savory filling I'm going to make is going to be a creamy chicken and spinach filling. I'm going to be using a quart-size mason jar, wide mouth, and I've got my canning funnel here. And I'm going to be starting with chicken slices. Got 1 cup of chicken slices. And next I'm going to be adding the sauce ingredients. I'm going to be adding some velouté, which is a chicken gravy mix. 1/2 cup of velouté. And then sour cream powder. I also need a 1/2 cup of sour cream powder. Now I'm just going to give this a little jiggle to settle all those powders down among the chicken so we have room for more ingredients. Next I'm going to add just a few seasonings. I've got some sherry powder right here. I'm going to be adding a teaspoon of the sherry powder. Now I'm going to call this an optional ingredient. This is kind of difficult to find. I will put my source down in the description box or in a pinned comment where I find this. But I love cooking with wine in my food. So I have sherry wine powder, white wine powder, and a red wine powder, I believe. I could only find one place and it wasn't Amazon. So I will put that link down below. Next, I'm going to add Italian seasoning. I'm going to use a 1/2 teaspoon. And I'm also going to use a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. I'm not going to add any salt to this because the gravy mix has salt in it, and it's going to have some other ingredients like cheese that have some salt. But if you like salt, if you try this and you find it's not salty enough for you, you can add a 1/4 teaspoon or a 1/2 teaspoon. That just depends on your personal taste. We have varying tastes for saltiness in my house, so I find it's always best to err on the side of caution because people can always add salt if they want it. Next, I'm going to be adding some freeze-dried spinach, 3/4 cup of the spinach. There's a 1/2. and a quarter. This is some of my favorite stuff for stirring a little bit of extra nutrition into just about any dish because it's already little pieces. You can just throw a handful in and it's going to add some vitamins, minerals, all kinds of good stuff. Next, I'm going to be adding some chopped tomato. This is freeze-dried tomato, and I'm going to be adding 3/4 of a cup of this as well. There's a 1/2 cup and another 1/4 cup. Next, I'm going to add some freeze-dried chopped onion, 1/4 cup of the chopped onion, and also some minced garlic that's freeze-dried. And I'm going to be adding 1 tablespoon of the minced garlic. Next, we've got mozzarella cheese. This is freeze-dried mozzarella cheese. I'm adding a 1/2 cup of the mozzarella cheese. And then the final ingredient is going to be some freeze-dried Parmesan cheese. Now, this is a very strongly flavored salty cheese, so I'm only adding a tablespoon of this. And now our jar is ready to go. I'm just going to put a lid on this. If I was putting this on the shelf for long term, I would add an oxygen absorber. 200 cc's should do it on the top of this quart jar. But because I'm going to be cooking this up for you tonight and showing you, I'm just going to throw a lid on. And there is our beautiful creamy chicken and spinach crepe filling. To prepare this chicken filling, once again, I'm going to use my butane burner. And a skillet like this works just perfect. I think this is probably a 12-inch skillet. I'm going to go ahead and open this up and just dump it right in the skillet. And I'm going to use 3 cups of water in this dish. I've gone ahead and added it into my mason jar. Remember, you can measure on your mason jar. I'm going to go ahead and just add this in. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes right now. And I'm just going to start blending this in, but I'm not going to put it on the heat until after that 10 minutes is up. That's going to give the water a chance to start rehydrating a lot of these ingredients before we put the heat on and the sauce starts to thicken. It's going to thicken quite a bit just here in this cold water, but it's going to give the chance for things like the cheese to rehydrate and the chicken to get a start on rehydrating so that this dish will come together the way that we want it to. So once I get this all blended together, I'm going to let it set for the rest of those 10 minutes and then put it on the heat. All right, so that's all moistened. I'm just going to leave this to set until my timer rings, and then I'll come back and put it on the heat. Okay, so now that my 10-minute timer just went off, this has been setting for 10 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on the heat. So I'm going to put this on medium-high heat, bring it up to a simmer. As soon as it simmers, I'm going to turn it down pretty low so that I can cover it and have it just stay at a simmer. And I am going to stir this pretty often as it's heating, just to make sure that nothing sticks or burns or anything like that. It's not going to take this long at all to come up to a simmer. All right, so now that this has come to a simmer and started to bubble, I am going to just turn it down about as low as I can get it, and I'm going to cover it up. And I'm just going to set a timer for 5 minutes and let this simmer for about 5 minutes. I am going to stir it occasionally while it simmers. I do want to say just one thing about the sour cream powder. Be mindful of the brand of sour cream powder that you use, because I've used a couple of different brands that were not compatible with one another. They were very different in their flavor and their level of tanginess, so they really weren't interchangeable. If I used one in a recipe that I developed with the other, it didn't work out. So that's one of those few ingredients where the brand can sometimes matter. I haven't tried every brand. I've only tried 2, but they were not compatible. So I'll put the brands of everything that I use down in the description box where I put my links so that you can make sure that you're using the same things that the recipe was tested with. This smells so good. It smells like an Italian restaurant. Okay, my timer just went off for 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off the heat. And I'm going to let this sit for 5 more minutes. Now, right now, probably all of the chicken is not quite refreshed. Usually, if I taste it at this point, some of the chicken might still be a little bit hard. But this is going to set for 5 or 10 more minutes, and that always does it for me. That always softens it the rest of the way up, right back to fresh chicken. So I'm going to let this set 5 or 10 minutes until everything is completely ready and it cools off a little bit, firms up so that it can go into our crepes. Okay, so the timer has gone off. This is set 5 more minutes. Just test a piece of chicken and make sure it's done. That's perfect. If for some reason your chicken is not all completely refreshed, you can let this set for 5 more minutes or so. All right, so I've got a warm crepe here. I think I'm actually getting the hang of this crepe cooking thing. This one looks pretty good. Now there's two ways that we could do this. We could either put the filling right down the center and roll it up in a long kind of log, or we can put the filling on half of it like we did with the sweet crepes and fold it into quarters. I guess that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this and this. And there is our savory filled crepe. I'm gonna go ahead and do one the other way too, just for the heck of it, so we can see the way they both look. Go ahead and spread some filling down the center. Here, and just fold that over. Fold that over like that. And there we go. That's another way you can do it. The great thing about this filling is that just like the crepes themselves are versatile, this filling is really versatile too. You could, if you didn't want to put this in crepes or you didn't have any crepes, you could also put this over pasta. You could put it over rice. You could use it as part of like a lasagna filling. There's really a million and one different things that you could do with this filling. Okay guys, that's the latest addition to our collection of meal in a jar recipes. You're definitely going to want to get this one on your shelf. Don't forget to check out our printable recipe pages, as well as our Meal in a Jar playlist and my Meal in a Jar Facebook group. I'm going to put links to all those down below, either in the video description or in a pinned comment. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a strawberry emoji down in the comments. And check out this video next for a more savory breakfast meal in a jar. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.